reading is from Paul's letter to the Galatians.
Let us be attentive.
Brethren, I would have you know that the gospel which was preached by me is not man's gospel. For I did not receive it from man, nor was I taught it, but it came through a revelation of Jesus Christ. For you have heard of my former life in Judaism, how I persecuted the church of God violently, and tried to destroy it. And I advocated an advance in Judaism beyond many of my own age among my people. So extremely zealous was I for the traditions of my fathers. But when he who had set me apart before I was born, and had called me through his grace, was pleased to reveal his Son to me, in order that I might preach him among the Gentiles, I did not confer with flesh and blood, nor did I go up to Jerusalem to those who were apostles before me. But I went away into Arabia, and again I returned to Damascus. Then after 3 years I went up to Jerusalem to visit Cephas, and remained with him 15 days. But I saw none of the other apostles, except James the Lord's brother.
We say unto you, the leader.
Alleluia, Alleluia, Alleluia.
Wisdom arise, let us hear the holy gospel. Peace be with all.
And with your spirit.
The reading is from the holy gospel according to St. Luke. Let us be attentive.
Glory to you, O Lord. Glory to you.
The Lord said, Now there was a certain rich man who was clothed in purple and fine linen, feasting in luxury every day. A certain beggar named Lazarus was laid out at his gate, full of sores, who desired to be fed with the crumbs that fell from the rich man's table. Yes, even dogs came and licked his sores. It happened that the beggar died, that he was carried away by the angels to Abraham's bosom. The rich man also died and was buried. In Hades he lifted up his eyes, being in torment, and saw Abraham far off and Lazarus in his bosom. He cried and said, Father Abraham, have mercy on me, and send Lazarus, so that he may dip the tip of his finger in water and cool my tongue, for I am in agony in this flame. But Abraham replied, Son, remember that in your lifetime you received good things, and Lazarus in the same way bad things. But now he is comforted here, and you are in anguish. Besides all this, between us and you a great gulf is fixed, so that those who want to pass from here to you cannot do so, and no one may cross over from there to us. He said, I ask you therefore, Father, that you would send Lazarus to my father's house, for I have 5 brothers, so that he might bear witness to them, so that they would not also come to this place of torment. Abraham replied to him, They have Moses and the prophets. Let them listen to them. But he said, No, Father Abraham. If one goes to them from the dead, they will repent. And then Abraham said to him, If they do not listen to Moses and the prophets, neither will they be convinced if someone rises from the dead.
Glory to you, O Lord. Glory to you.
Good morning. Christ is in our midst.
He is and always shall be.
So welcome, St. Paul. those of you who are on the first pew, that's a little different. And maybe just slightly aware, a little uncomfortable, but I tell you, when I stand at the altar, I'm much more uncomfortable than that, because I'm not worthy to be at the altar. But when I look at our God crucified, I feel consolation that in spite of my unworthiness, God has come to us in such a humble form that it makes it possible for me to stand there. So I have little sympathy for you. I'm surprised everybody's even able to sit. In some Orthodox churches, there are no pews. You can find that in the Russian church or the Moroccan church. Kind of a compromise in the Greek church in America, and so there are pews, and sometimes people sit, but most of the time, so in a regular Orthodox church, you'd be standing the whole time. Some services go from 5 to 11 hours of standing. If it was a vigil on Mount Athos, they're the monastics. The longest one, well, I was in one for 9 hours on Mount Athos, but the longest regular service was in Russia. That was a monastery too, but that was 5.5 hours. And we were the first Americans that had come there in years, and so this was 20 years ago. One of them, monks, kindly said, "Oh, you're Americans. We have some beds in another room if you need to lie." All right, let's see. Where's the confirmation class? I was hoping y'all would be on the first pew because I wanted to start off with a question for you. So. There is a very famous anthropologist named Margaret Mead. She studies the bones of prehistoric people, trying to understand how our civilization came to be. And she gave a lecture one time, and someone asked her, "What would you say would let you know that real human beings now existed, that there was the beginning of civilization?" What would you say? What would you expect to find in a dig of ancient bones? Anybody? What would let you know that people were there and it wasn't just animals? Yeah.
A body to do it?
Okay, a body, but how would we know that that body wasn't just a very, very ancient being that wasn't really yet moving towards civilization?
Clothing?
Clothing would be a possibility. Okay. What?
Jewelry?
Jewelry.
Yeah.
Ah. Okay. Anybody else take a guess? What?
Pottery?
Pottery. Okay. Tools. Well, guess what? None of those were very important to Margaret Mead. She said, we can tell that civilization is arriving when we find a femur bone, the femur's top of the leg, that has been broken and healed. Think about that. Why? Because that means that somebody went out and hunted, brought food, and protected somebody who couldn't get around because they didn't have anything like we have now, so they had to be still until their femur was healed. She says this is the first sign that civilization's arising. I want to use that as a kind of backdrop to understand this parable this morning. So the details we have of this are that we have two people. One of them has a name. The other one doesn't. This, some of the fathers of the church think is significant. If you have a name, you're recognized as a person. Lazarus, the one who was full of sores and the dogs licked his wounds outside the home of this unknown rich man, he had a name. The rich man didn't. What do we know about the rich man? Well, he had clothes and they were really beautiful purple, what kings wear, and linen. And he feasted sumptuously every day. But even though that was going on, and Lazarus would have been content just to eat a crumb that fell from this man's table, there was nothing for him. So this suggests a relationship that didn't exist really between the rich man and Lazarus. That for the rich man, Lazarus may have had no name. If he did, the name didn't invite any respect. There was no relationship. There was no community. There was no civilization between this man and Lazarus. When I was doing my doctoral studies, I was researching how religious maturity is related to clinical empathy. And I didn't have enough subjects in my psychology and pastoral counseling students. So a friend of mine that taught at the university said, why don't you take a group of business master's students and add them in? So the business department agreed. So I gave them all the same tests and things. And I was looking for something else, but one of the things I found was all the business students, these were equal graduate level, were a full standard deviation below the psychology and counseling students in empathy. Now there's 70 studies in 70 different countries that show that when people begin to chase after money, they become less caring of the environment, more manipulative, and less empathic. Now that means if you get a lot of money, it doesn't necessarily help you. It could actually become a big problem. John Jacob Astor, who was better than most in his day, gave 2.5% of his wealth to the public charities when he died. It was kind of expected years ago that this be done. No one expected someone to take it all for himself. When Cornelius Vanderbilt in 1877 died, he had $100 million. In today's money, that's $2.8 billion. Not as rich as maybe Bill Gates, but a lot of money. Vanderbilt left the entire estate to his son William. And when the public protested, William said, "The public be damned." So, we have a situation in which there is a gap between what protected and interested the nameless man and what was happening for Lazarus. And Lazarus ends up in the bosom of Abraham, known by Abraham, and this other man in Hades suddenly starts to sober up. And I say sober up because I would say he was drunk on money. He was drunk on the power and privilege that allowed him to surround himself with stimulation and comfort in such a way that he had no awareness whatsoever from his heart, no empathy for the man outside his gate who was suffering. So we don't just get drunk on alcohol, we get drunk on money, we get drunk on buying clothes. Some people buy clothes and have it in their closet, and they never wear it. It's functioning as something else. So we want to have compassion for the fact that the rich man was sick, but he didn't know it. He couldn't say everything, which is largely the case when we get so sick that we are now the servant of the thing that is making us sick. It actually, there's a whole neurological basis of that. I wonder if that, I've never thought of that with money, but we see it with other things like alcohol, pornography, and different things. You actually lose the possibility of making a choice with the prefrontal cortex. The brain is hijacked to the back, and then it chooses for you. That's why you got to get 90 days of abstinence in order to start to recover your ability to choose. So if we think about this parable not as just about money, money is the sign of possession. Money is the sign of what destroys civilization in this place. It doesn't have to. Job was wealthy, Abraham was wealthy. There are a lot of wealthy people who are real generous. They're not sick. But some are in big trouble. How many of y'all have ever seen the still face experiment? You should look it up. Look up on YouTube, the still face experiment. It's a little clip of a mother and her little baby, maybe not quite even a year old, and they're playing. communicating. They're in communion with each other. And then the experimenter gets the mother to turn around for a second. And then when she turns back, she's not to move her face. Just be like this. And you watch the baby immediately, as soon as the mother turns around and doesn't show any affect, doesn't look into the eyes of the baby and mirror her, the baby begins to feel. And so she tries all kinds of things. She plays, she points, she screams a little funny scream, and nothing moves the mother. So then the baby loses control over her body, begins to cry and wail, and you can see she's just writhing. And then the mother really can't stand it anymore after a couple of minutes, and she soothes the baby, and then the baby comes around quickly. But what this shows is, we human beings, the mark of civilization, the mark of becoming persons, is to be able to have communion with another person, to look them in the eye, feel safe, feel welcome, and at a very mature level, to realize that if I have a broken femur, if I am starving outside your house, that you won't do what that mother did. Now, why would we do that? Maybe because I'm afraid of losing what I have. Maybe because part of my heart wants to turn over my whole life to a person. So I struggle with that. This is a good thing, actually. We need to look at that and come to some wisdom about it. Because in a way, it is like an angel is falling to us. It's like Christ says, "Here I am. I'm a beggar. I'm in prison. I'm sick. What are you doing? Do you even care?" And so then we wonder, why didn't I act? If I'd known it was you, Christ, I would have. Well, it is. Because no one is not beloved to Christ. So all of us, this parable invites us to look at what's our relationship as persons with one another. And do I live my life in such a way that I am gaining a real name, that I will be called by the Lord by my name? Or will the Lord say, "I don't know you. You never showed up. You entertained yourself. You wrapped yourself in blankets of worldliness. You never looked for me. You never looked at me in the eye. And when people were around you, if you could have seen that they were within me, you did nothing." So I think this parable is about community. And it's a call to us to look and see that community and being able to look one another in the eye depends on love and sobriety. If I'm not sober, I can't see you. If I do see you, I'll distort you. And every passion that we say in the Orthodox Church, everything that becomes a passion in our life or an idol that separates us from God, is a form of some kind of blindness, ultimately. It stops me from seeing. So I want to move toward being able to do something if someone has a broken femur, whatever that may look like. I want it to move me. And I want to take it seriously. Because I don't want to live in a world where I get bigger and bigger houses, more and more quiet cars that insulate me from everything, look at computers, and live farther and farther away from anything resembling a real relationship. That's why the church is so vitally important to all of us, because in the church, it's the one place in the world when we come that our task is to see one another, to notice one another, to know one another's name, and to realize when we say Christ is in our midst, this is the truth. And then we can do some other things that we wouldn't feel we had the courage to do if Christ weren't here. Just like I would never have the courage to stand before the altar, because the longer I live, the more sins I know of. The more I see I'm capable of every spiritual virus that every human being can have. And that there is in me still something that would delight in me. So I can't let my guard down. I have to keep being watchful. I have to keep going to confession. I have to keep saying, "Lord, I betrayed you. I turned away from you." And there's hundreds of ways to do that. Gossip, slander, posing a little bit to get people to think you're special. Not that we don't want to be special, but if I become this image of myself and then use you to validate it, I'm not in a relationship with you. You're just audience in the theater, and I'm in starring role. That's useless. What I want is to stand on the same ground and to meet you, have an encounter with you. This is what Christ wants with us. May this parable help us realize this, because after we die, we will sober up. I can't help it, but the problem will be if I sober up and I didn't exist, because I gave myself to the wrong God my entire life, that's going to be painful. Lord God.